Sometimes the strongest people break in the quietest moments, and sometimes holding each other is the only way to hold it together. Life has this funny way of hitting you when you're already down. 3 months had passed since David signed those divorce papers, and honestly, he was still trying to figure out how to be alone again. The apartment felt too quiet most days. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than it should be. He'd moved into this small 2-bedroom place right after everything was finalized. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof. The living room had a couch he'd bought from a thrift store and a TV that worked most of the time. His bedroom was simple too, just a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out at the parking lot. Not exactly the dream life he'd imagined when he was younger. The hardest part wasn't the divorce itself, it was learning how to fill the silence. When you've been married for 7 years, you get used to having someone around, someone to talk to about your day, someone to watch movies with, someone to share dinner with. Now he was eating cereal for dinner more often than he cared to admit. His phone would ring sometimes, and he'd get excited thinking it might be a friend calling to hang out, but it was usually just telemarketers or his insurance company. The loneliness was the worst part. It sat in his chest like a heavy stone, especially in the evenings when he had nothing to distract himself with. But there was one person who never let him completely disappear into his sadness. His sister Lisa had been checking on him almost every day since the divorce. She'd call or text, sometimes just to say hello, sometimes to drag him out of the apartment for lunch or grocery shopping. She understood him in a way that nobody else did, probably because they'd grown up together, in the same house with the same parents. Lisa was 2 years younger than David, but she'd always been the more responsible one. Even when they were kids, she was the one who remembered to pack lunch for school trips and reminded him about homework. Now that they were adults, she was still looking out for him. She never made him feel like a burden, never acted like his problems were too much to handle. That Tuesday evening started like any other. David had come home from work feeling drained. His job at the insurance office wasn't terrible, but it wasn't exciting either. He spent most of his day staring at a computer screen and filling out forms. By 5 o'clock, he was ready to go home and collapse. He'd changed into comfortable clothes, old jeans and a t-shirt, and was lying on his bed staring up at the ceiling. The ceiling had a small water stain in the corner that looked like a cloud. He'd been staring at it for weeks, wondering if he should tell his landlord about it or just ignore it like he ignored most things these days. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside and the neighbors upstairs walking around. Sometimes he could hear their TV through the thin walls, but today everything was peaceful. Too peaceful, maybe. The kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts sound too loud. He was thinking about dinner, trying to decide if he had enough energy to cook something or if he'd just order pizza again. Pizza had become his go-to meal because it was easy, and he didn't have to think about it. Plus, the leftovers lasted for a couple of days. That's when he heard the key turning in the front door lock. Lisa had a spare key, and she'd warned him she might stop by after work. She'd promised to bring Chinese food from that place they both liked, and maybe they could watch a movie together. It sounded perfect, actually. Much better than sitting alone with his thoughts. He could hear her moving around in the kitchen, probably setting down the food and maybe grabbing plates. Lisa always thought of details like that. She never just brought food and expected him to figure out the rest. She'd bring napkins, drinks, sometimes even chopsticks if the restaurant forgot to include them. The sound of her footsteps coming down the hallway made him feel better already. Just knowing someone else was in the apartment changed everything. The silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. He sat up on the bed, ready to thank her for bringing dinner and for caring enough to check on him again. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened when she knocked on his bedroom door and walked in. Her smile looked different somehow. Not the usual cheerful greeting he was expecting. There was something else in her expression, something that made him sit up straighter and pay attention. Something was about to change, and he could feel it in the air between them. Lisa knocked gently on his bedroom door, just like she always did. She never just barged in, even though she was his sister and they'd grown up together. That was just the kind of person she was, always respectful, always thinking about other people's feelings. "Hey, I brought your favorite Chinese food," she said as she pushed the door open. Her voice sounded normal enough, but David noticed something different right away. She was carrying 2 bags from Golden Dragon, the restaurant they'd been going to since they were teenagers. The smell of sweet and sour chicken and fried rice filled the room, making his stomach growl. She walked over to his dresser and set the bags down carefully. David expected her to start unpacking the food like she usually did, maybe joke about how much they'd ordered or complain about the traffic on her way over. But instead, she just stood there for a moment, looking at the bags. Then she did something that made David sit up straight and really pay attention. She started taking off her jacket. Nothing weird about that. People take off their jackets when they come inside. But then she sat down on the edge of his bed and started unlacing her sneakers, pulling them off one by one. "Lisa, what's going on?" David asked, confusion creeping into his voice. Something felt different about the whole situation, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. She stood up and reached for the hem of her sweater. David's brain started racing, trying to understand what was happening. This wasn't normal behavior, not even for his sister, who was pretty comfortable around family. They were close, but not this kind of close. "Lisa, seriously, what are you doing?" he asked again, his voice getting more concerned. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, ready to stand up if he needed to. That's when he saw her face clearly for the first time since she'd walked into the room. Her eyes were red and watery, like she'd been crying or trying not to cry. Her usual smile was there, but it looked forced, like she was trying to hold herself together. She pulled her sweater over her head and dropped it on the floor next to her shoes. She was wearing a simple white t-shirt underneath, nothing fancy or unusual, but the way she was acting made everything feel charged with emotion that David couldn't understand yet. "I need you to hold me, David," she said, and her voice cracked a little bit. "Mom called today." Those 4 words hit David like a punch to the chest. Their mother never called during the week unless something was wrong. She was usually too busy with her book club or her garden or her volunteer work at the local hospital. When she did call, it was usually on Sunday evenings for their weekly family check-in. Lisa unbuttoned her jeans and stepped out of them, folding them neatly and placing them on the dresser next to the Chinese food bags. She was wearing plain, cotton underwear and her t-shirt. Nothing that should have felt strange, but David's mind was spinning, trying to process what was happening. "What did Mom say?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. His sister never acted like this. She was always the strong one, the one who handled everything with grace and composure. Seeing her like this, vulnerable and shaking, scared him more than he wanted to admit. Lisa climbed onto the bed next to him, pulling back the covers. She was crying now, not sobbing, but tears were streaming down her face. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd shrunk into herself. "David, I've been holding this in all day," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been making phone calls and looking up doctors and researching treatment options, and I've been trying to be strong for everyone. But I can't do it anymore. I just need my big brother to hold me like when we were kids." The mention of their childhood made David's heart ache. He remembered all those times when Lisa had nightmares or got scared during thunderstorms. She would sneak into his room and climb into his bed, and he would put his arm around her until she fell asleep. It had been their thing, their way of taking care of each other when the world felt too big and scary. But they weren't kids anymore. They were adults with their own lives and their own problems. David was still trying to figure out how to be single again, and Lisa had her own job and her own apartment across town. They didn't need each other the same way they used to, except maybe they did. Lisa slid under his covers and pressed herself against his side, just like she used to do when she was 7 years old and afraid of the dark. Her skin was warm, and he could feel her heart beating fast against his ribs. She was trembling slightly. Whether from cold or emotion, he couldn't tell. "Tell me what Mom said," David said softly, putting his arm around her shoulders. Whatever it was, they would figure it out together. That's what families did. Lisa took a deep breath, the kind you take when you're about to say something that will change everything. David could feel her whole body tense up against him, like she was gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. "The doctors found something," she said, her voice so quiet he almost didn't hear her. Mom went for her regular checkup last week. Remember? She mentioned it when we talked on Sunday, said it was just routine. David nodded. He remembered their mother mentioning it briefly during their weekly phone call. She'd said something about getting some tests done, but she'd sounded casual about it, the way people do when they're not worried about anything serious. Well, it wasn't routine, Lisa continued, and David could hear her trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Peterson called her this morning with the results. They found cancer, David, everywhere. The word hit David like a cold wave. Cancer. That word that everyone fears, that word that changes everything the moment it's spoken out loud. He felt his chest tighten, like someone was squeezing his lungs. What do you mean everywhere? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Lisa turned her face into his shoulder, and he could feel her tears soaking through his t-shirt. It started in her pancreas, but it spread. Her liver, her lungs, her bones. Stage 4, they said. The worst stage. David's mind started racing, trying to process what his sister was telling him. Their mother was 62 years old, still young by today's standards. She went for walks every morning, ate healthy food, took her vitamins. She wasn't supposed to get sick like this. This was the kind of thing that happened to other people's parents, not theirs. How long? He asked, the question feeling heavy in his mouth. 6 months, Lisa whispered. Maybe less, maybe more if she responds well to treatment, but the doctors don't sound very hopeful. 6 months. David tried to imagine their world, without their mother in it, and his brain just couldn't do it. She'd been the center of their family for as long as he could remember. She was the one who called to check on them, who remembered birthdays and anniversaries, who made sure everyone got together for holidays. She wants to fight it, Lisa said, lifting her head to look at him. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She's already scheduled to start chemotherapy next week. She said she's not giving up without a battle. That sounded like their mother. She'd never been the type to back down from anything difficult. When their father left when David was 12 and Lisa was 10, she'd worked 2 jobs to keep them in the same house and the same schools. When David broke his leg playing football in high school, she'd driven him to physical therapy 3 times a week for months. She was a fighter. But David, Lisa continued, I've been researching pancreatic cancer all day. The survival rates are terrible. Even with treatment, most people don't make it past a year. And the treatment is going to make her so sick. She's going to lose her hair. She's going to be weak and tired. She's going to hurt. David could hear the pain in his sister's voice. She'd always been the one who took care of everyone else, who researched every problem and tried to find solutions. This must be killing her. Knowing that there might not be a solution this time, I've been calling specialists all day, Lisa went on. I found a doctor in the city who's doing experimental treatments. I've been looking into clinical trials. I've been reading medical journals online until my eyes hurt. I've been trying to find something, anything that might help her. David tightened his arms around his sister. He could only imagine how exhausting this day had been for her. While he'd been lying on his bed feeling sorry for himself, Lisa had been fighting a battle to save their mother's life. And then I had to call work and tell them I might need to take some time off. I had to call Aunt Jenny and Uncle Robert to let them know. I had to be the one to break this news to everyone, and I had to keep it together every single time. I had to sound strong and confident, like I had everything under control. David understood now why she'd come to him like this. She'd been holding up the entire family all day, being the strong one, the responsible one, the one with the plan. But even the strongest people have breaking points. I couldn't tell them I was scared, Lisa said, her voice cracking again. I couldn't tell them that I feel like a little girl who just wants her mom to be okay. I couldn't tell them that I don't know how to handle this, that I don't know how to fix it. David felt tears starting in his own eyes. His sister, who'd always seemed so capable and put together, was falling apart in his arms. And honestly, he was falling apart too. The thought of losing their mother was too big and too scary to wrap his mind around. So I came here, Lisa whispered. Because you. For a while they just held each other and cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind of crying you see in movies, but the deep, quiet kind that comes from a place so raw and honest that words can't touch it. David felt his own tears mixing with Lisa's on his shoulder, and somehow that made everything feel more real. This was really happening. Their mother was sick, maybe dying, and there wasn't anything either of them could do to fix it. All the money in the world, all the research in the world, all the love in the world might not be enough to save her. It was the kind of helplessness that makes you feel like a child again, small and scared in a world that's too big to understand. But there was something comforting about being scared together. When David was going through his divorce, he'd felt so alone in his fear and sadness. Nobody else really understood what it was like to watch 7 years of marriage fall apart, to sign papers that ended the life you thought you were going to live forever. But this was different. Lisa was just as scared as he was, just as heartbroken, just as desperate for their mother to be okay. "Remember when we were kids and Mom would make us hot chocolate when we couldn't sleep?" Lisa said after a while, her voice muffled against his shoulder. David smiled through his tears. She'd heat up the milk on the stove instead of using the microwave because she said it tasted better that way. And she'd put those little marshmallows in it, the tiny ones that would melt right away, Lisa added. And we'd sit at the kitchen table in our pajamas while she told us stories about when she was little. "She always made everything better," David said. "When you had nightmares, when I broke my arm, when Dad left, she always knew exactly what to say or do to make us feel safe again." Lisa lifted her head and looked at him. Her face was blotchy. From crying, her hair was messy, but David could see something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not hope exactly, but maybe acceptance, or maybe just love. "Do you remember the story she used to tell us about the family tree?" Lisa asked. David nodded. Their mother had this way of explaining difficult things through stories. When their father left, she'd told them about how families were like trees with deep roots that connected everyone even when the branches grew in different directions. She'd said that no matter what happened, the roots would always be there holding them together. She said that even when people we love go away, the love doesn't go away, Lisa continued. The roots stay in the ground, keeping us connected. They talked for hours after that, not just about their mother's illness, but about everything. They talked about their childhood, about the games they used to play in the backyard and the fights they used to have over who got to control the TV remote. They talked about their mother's laugh, the way she hummed while she cooked dinner, how she always wore that old apron with the faded flowers on it. They talked about their fears, too. Lisa admitted that she was terrified of watching their mother get sicker, of seeing her weak and tired from the chemotherapy. David said he was scared, of not knowing what to say, of not being helpful enough, of letting their mother down when she needed them most. "I keep thinking about all the times I was too busy to call her," Lisa said. "All those Sunday nights when I'd make excuses to cut the conversation short because I had laundry to do or emails to answer. I wish I could take all of that back." David knew exactly what she meant. He'd been so wrapped up in his own problems lately that he hadn't been the best son. He'd answered his mother's calls, but he hadn't really been present during their conversations. He'd been thinking about his divorce, his loneliness, his uncertain future. Now he realized how selfish that had been. "We can't change the past," David said. "But we can change how we handle the next 6 months. We can make sure she knows how much we love her. We can make sure she's not scared or lonely. We can be there for her the way she's always been there for us." Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I want to take some time off work. I want to spend as much time with her as possible. I want to help her with the doctor appointments and the treatments. I want to cook for her and clean her house and just sit with her when she doesn't feel good." "I want to help too," David said. "Maybe I can drive her to appointments when you can't. Maybe I can research treatment options or talk to doctors with you. Maybe I can just be there to hold her hand when she's scared." The more they talked, the clearer things became. Yes, their mother was sick. Yes, they might lose her. But they still had time, and they could choose how to use that time. They could spend it feeling sorry for themselves, or they could spend it loving her as hard as they could. As the night went on, David realized something else. For the first time since his divorce, he wasn't thinking about his own problems, his loneliness, his uncertainty about the future, his struggles with being single again. All of that seemed small compared to what his family was facing. It wasn't that his problems didn't matter, but they were manageable. They were temporary. This was bigger than anything he'd been dealing with. David woke up slowly, the way you do when your body knows it's morning but your mind isn't quite ready to start the day. For a moment, he forgot where he was and why he felt so emotionally drained. Then he felt the weight of his sister's arm across his chest and remembered everything from the night before. Lisa was still asleep, curled up against his side like she used to do when they were kids. Her breathing was deep and steady, peaceful in a way it hadn't been when she'd first arrived last night. Her face looked younger somehow, relaxed, like sleep had washed away some of the worry lines that had appeared when she'd told him about their mother. The morning light was coming through his bedroom window, soft and golden, making everything feel calm and hopeful. It was the kind of light that makes you think maybe things will be okay, even when you know they might not be. David lay there, for a while, just listening to his sister breathe and thinking about everything they'd talked about during the night. He thought about their mother, probably waking up in her own bed right now, maybe making coffee in that old coffee maker she'd had for 15 years. Was she thinking about the cancer? Was she scared? Or was she already making plans, figuring out how to fight this thing with everything she had? Their mother had always been an early riser. Even on weekends, she'd be up by 7, puttering around the house, watering her plants, reading the newspaper. David wondered if that would change now. Would the treatments make her too tired to keep her normal routine? Would she lose that energy that had always seemed endless? Lisa stirred beside him, making a small sound as she woke up. She opened her eyes and looked around, confused for a second, then seemed to remember why she was there. "Good morning," David said quietly. "Morning," she replied, her voice still thick with sleep. She didn't move away from him right away, and David didn't mind. There was something peaceful about lying there together. No rushing. No pressure to figure everything out immediately. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I expected," Lisa said, finally sitting up and stretching. "I thought I'd be awake all night thinking about everything, but having you there, it helped. It reminded me that I'm not alone in this." David sat up too, running his hands through his messy hair. "You're definitely not alone. We're going to get through this together, all of us." Lisa smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her since she'd arrived last night. Not the forced smile she'd been wearing to hold herself together, but a genuine one that reached her eyes. "I should probably call Mom," she said. "She's probably wondering why I haven't checked in yet. I told her I'd call first thing in the morning to see how she was feeling." "What are you going to tell her?" David asked. "The truth," Lisa said. "That we love her and we're going to be there for her every step of the way. That she doesn't have to face this alone." They got up and went to the kitchen, where the Chinese food from last night was still sitting on the counter, forgotten in bags that had gone cold hours ago. David started making coffee while Lisa called their mother. He could hear her side of the conversation, gentle and reassuring, telling their mom that they were going to come visit that afternoon. When Lisa hung up, she looked relieved. "She sounds okay," she said. "Scared, but okay. She wants to show us all the paperwork from the doctor, and she's already made a list of questions to ask at her next appointment." "That sounds like Mom," David said, handing her a cup of coffee. "Always organized, always prepared." "She said she's been up since 5, researching treatment options online," Lisa continued. "She found some success stories, people who beat pancreatic cancer. She wants to talk to us about which hospital we think she should go to for treatment." David felt a surge of admiration for their mother. Even facing the worst news of her life, she was fighting. She wasn't giving up or feeling sorry for herself. She was making plans and looking for hope wherever she could find it. "We should go grocery shopping before we visit her," Lisa said. "I want to cook dinner for her tonight. Something healthy and delicious. Maybe that soup she used to make for us when we were sick. The one with the vegetables and the little pasta?" David asked. "That's the one," She always said it had healing powers, Lisa laughed, and the sound filled David's kitchen with warmth. As they sat there drinking coffee and making plans for the day, David realized something had changed. Not just about their mother's situation, but about him. For months, he'd been drifting through his days, feeling lost and purposeless. His divorce had left him questioning everything about his life, wondering what he was supposed to do next. But now he knew. He was supposed to be a son. He was supposed to be a brother. He was supposed to show up for the people who loved him, the way they'd always shown up for him. His mother and sister needed him, and that gave his life meaning in a way that nothing else had lately. Lisa seemed to understand what he was thinking. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For last night. For letting me fall apart, for not making it weird or complicated. I needed exactly what you gave me. Just your presence, just someone who loves Mom as much as I do." David reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That's what family is for. We take care of each other, especially when things get hard." "The next few months are going to be really difficult," Lisa said. "There are going to be good days and bad days. There are going to be times when we feel hopeful and times when we feel hopeless. But at least we'll face it together." David nodded. "And maybe, just maybe, we'll have more time with her than the doctors think. Maybe she'll surprise everyone." "Maybe she will," Lisa agreed. "She surprised us before." They finished their coffee and started getting ready for the day. David took a shower while Lisa borrowed some of his clothes. They threw away the cold Chinese food and made a shopping list for groceries. Everything felt different now, purposeful and important. As they were getting ready to leave, David looked around his apartment one more time. It still looked the same. The thrift store couch, the water stain on the ceiling, the silence that had felt so heavy just yesterday. But somehow it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a place where important things happened, where family came together when they needed each other most. The next 6 months would be the hardest of their lives, David knew that. But they would also be some of the most meaningful. They had work to do, love to give, and memories to make. And that was enough to get started.